region. And a lot of people like to go to Bali, Indonesia. It's one of the most special and major tourist destinations of the world. But people go there for the culture, or they go there for the diving close to the surface, or the great food, or the people. Alexis goes somewhere a little bit different, into the mesophytic coral ecosystem. So he's a marine biologist, a technical scientific diver, an underwater photographer, and he likes to go down, way, way down beneath the waves, where a few people like to go, to explore and showcase a really special and unique ecosystem that lives there. So I'm excited to bring in Alexis to share a little bit more about this. Alexis, welcome in, man. Thank you for sharing a question with David. That doesn't happen very often. Nice to have the support in the broadcast. Your camera's off, but I think you're there. Let's see.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Your video has been working fine in the background the whole time, so I think it's just having a little bit of trouble, but it's going to come back. And
yeah, I hope so.
That's half the fun. Something has to go a little wrong, otherwise it's not a video call.
Of course, that was to be expected.
But if you want to bring up your screen share, hopefully that works really well for us, and we can showcase some of the places you've taken photos of.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jesse, for the introduction, and thank you, David, for the great work about on the hornbill. It definitely is important thing.
It's been such
amazing
an amazing
animal, and they are like forest engineers. So yeah, can you see my screen?
It's starting to come up. It's thinking about it. It's buffering. We might need to, let's see. We'll hope comes up together, and if it doesn't, maybe you can sign out and sign back in again, and the connection will work a little bit better if you'd like. Oh, no, we're back.
Okay,
we're in.
sure.
We're in, Alexis. Yep, you're good.
Okay.
Don't sign out. Stay. Oh, go
right.
full screen.
I'm not going to... Yeah. I'm not going to touch anything. So can you see the full screen now?
It's not full screen, but it is. Now it's full screen. It's perfect. It's good. You're good to go, man.
All right. Well, thank you, Jesse, again. Thank you for organizing all this event and having me presenting. So the idea of this presentation is to bring you with me on a deep dive on the mesophotic coral ecosystems in Indonesia, as you mentioned. So I'm aware that most of us didn't hear of mesophotic coral ecosystems before. So I'm going to get rid of boring definitions as we start. So what is a mesophotic coral ecosystem? I think we are all aware of what is coral ecosystem, especially in this region in Southeast Asia. I'm sorry if there is a noise in the background. They have decided to start a construction project today in front of the place I live. But anyway, so back on the coral reefs. So these are structures that are built by an animal, right? Hard corals, clear actinian corals. So they are found usually between 0 and 30 meters deep. And those hard corals are using photosynthesis, basically light from the sun, for their metabolic processes and for being able to produce a very hard calcium carbonate skeleton that is creating those huge structures that we can enjoy when we are lucky enough to snorkel or dive in these regions. And these structures are actually home to 1,000 species of vertebrates and invertebrates. So they are extremely important in terms of conservation. And they are, of course, threatened by climate change. Lately, we've heard sad news about massive coral bleaching in Australia, but it's happening in many other countries. So now, as I said, the shallow reef systems are located in places where the light is intense from the sun and the temperature and deeper than that. So this is a section of a reef. Systems are found below the shallow surface reef. So the current definition says that mesophotic coral ecosystems, or MCEs, are composed of light-dependent corals and associated communities that can be found at depth ranging between 30 to 40 meters down to 150 or over 150 meters in tropical and subtropical country. So you have to keep in mind that the deeper you go, less light you'll find. At 100 meters, you have 1% of the sunlight that can reach those depths. And the deeper you go, the lower the temperature will be. So the conditions are starting to get harder and harder for scleractinian corals to survive. So why studying these habitats? Because, well, they are deep, they are difficult to survey. Why risking our lives? Why investing a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy into studying these habitats? Well, actually, they are extremely rich in terms of biodiversity. There is a unique biodiversity down there and a lot of endemic species, which means species that are found nowhere else, right? So if you lose these habitats, you lose species that can't adapt to any other kind of environment. They are also very important for global coral reef resilience and for fisheries, because they can be spawning ground or nursery ground for some species of commercially important fish, but also for not important in terms of fisheries, but for the health of systems. Scientists they act in very specific case as a source to reject coral or a source populate that have been. But we shouldn't on solution, because they are not, and they are threatened by our activities. We'll dive into that a little bit further deep later. It's important to note that most of the scientific literature that has been published so far about coral reef environment fail to address anything deeper than 30 meters, because 30 meters is actually the limit of recreational scuba. So deeper than 30 meters, basically very little work has been conducted. It's difficult, it's a bit more risky, and we didn't have the tools to study those properly until a couple of decades ago. So there is a lack of knowledge on this deeper part of the reef. However, MCEs have been around 80% of coral reef habitat worldwide. This is huge, but very little is known in comparison to shallow water reef. And they deserve proper protection. But in today's society, to have a proper protection, you usually need scientific data to back up your talk, or that convince decision maker to set up something. So we need to increase about this unique mesophotic habitat, and that's why it's important to study them and to document them while we still have time. That's a little bit of the context how I started. So together with the local university here, we did to start documenting and studying those mesophotic habitats. We have to keep in mind that Indonesia is at the heart of the Coral Triangle, which is a biodiversity hotspot. So you have so much thing going on here. It's extremely diversified in terms of species. It's a wonderful place to explore, either on land or underwater. Unfortunately, very little work has been done on MCEs here in Indonesia, because, as I said, of the difficulty to access them. So how to study these deep dwelling reefs, these mesophotic reefs, sorry. So during our field work, we usually team with local scientists and students from our partner university, who are coming and monitor and deploy probes to monitor water column parameters, because it's very important in order to have a good idea of what's going on, to understand the environmental factors that are affecting the locations we are working on. So thanks to these oceanographers, we are able to collect valuable data about the water column. So it looks like that on the computer, not very engaging, but actually this is the raw data that we can collect. So on the left side, you have the salinity, for example, and on the right side, the temperature from 0 to 90 meters deep. And you can see that the temperature is rather stable until 40, 45 meters. And then you can see that there is a shift, there is a drop in temperature around 50 to 60 meters. And that's where the thermocline is. I can explain why we have some specific assemblages of species. We will find some coral organisms at 40 meters that you won't find anymore at 70, for example. But to better understand and interpret what we see with our eyes, we also need to understand what's going on in the environment. But we also, of course, go there. We need to go there to see that with our own eyes, to collect samples, to also document that with our eyes and cameras. And for that, we use technical diving, and especially closed-circuit rebreathers. These are machines that basically are recycling the air we are breathing. That allows us to not make any more bubbles when we are at depth, which is great for coming close to wildlife without frightening it. But it's also a good tool because it can increase the time we spend underwater and also allow us to go deeper. So without those tools, we wouldn't be able to really document properly the mesophotic part, because we wouldn't be able to stay long enough, or we would be too heavy with all those scuba tanks to explore properly and document properly these habitats. And thanks to that, we can deploy data loggers also at different depths. We deployed loggers up to 120 meters during our project. And these loggers will stay there underwater for many months, recording temperature, water level, or light during many months, like every minute, but during very long periods of time. And that gives us a very powerful indication on how are the oceanographic conditions on our research location. Deployed at 65 meters. You can see in blue, this is the temperature variations across the months, and in black at the top, this is the water level variation, which is the tide, basically. So we can really link environmental factors or environmental variations to the observations or behavior we spot when we are doing our deep dives. But now let's in diving itself and observing and documenting these unique habitats. So as I said, in mesophotic ecosystems at 100 meters or more, you have only 1% of the sunlight that reaches these depths. Therefore, you don't have as much hard corals that you would have shallower. You don't have also the same species. And the species you have are usually smaller because less light, so less photosynthesis. So you might have a growth rate that are slightly lower than in shallower part of the reef. So you have a kind of switch from hard corals to soft corals. But this world is far from being colorless and lifeless. Actually, it's thriving. I mean, the life is everywhere and very colorful animals, actually. So it's more the territory of what we call soft corals. So soft corals, they don't produce this calcium carbonate skeleton that hard corals are producing. So soft corals encompass like sea fans, like on this picture, or these kind of whip corals here that can grow in dense forest, dense animal forest there. And this is very interesting and important from an ecological point of view, because this forest can create a new habitat for other species to come and live there. They shelter other species. They also change the local current condition by slowing down current that increase the probability of other animals living there. So they are extremely important for various species of invertebrates and vertebrates that are thriving in this deep environment. As I said, environmental factors can dictate the species you will find, but also the shape of these species. On this image, you can see a soft coral. It's a Gorgonian coral, probably a new species, actually. And you can see, compared to the first photos I showed you of sea fan, here the branches are very tight, very packed around the main stalk. Probably, I mean, the current in this area is so strong. You can look around on this image in the background, you won't see anything growing much taller than 15 centimeters. And it's because anything taller than that is not strong enough, or if you had a big sea fan, because of the strong current, they would probably get ripped off the seabed and just carried away where they will die. So only the toughest can grow tall on this high current area, which means, which shows actually how important it is to understand environmental factors as well, to understand what biodiversity you have. We can't ecosystem without mentioning black corals. So contrary to their name, black at all, when they are alive. Alive, they look like this. Of what you see here, denomination come from the skeleton that is completely black. So if this animal would happen to die, you would see it completely black. And once again, this structure, these animals are extremely important because they create complexity on the seabed. Without them, you would just have barren rock, and life wouldn't be as diversified as it is thanks to them. And in fact, if you look closely on this picture, in the middle of the black coral, you would see a small fish, red with red bars and stripes. This is a long-nosed hawkfish hiding in between the branches of this hard coral that was found at I think a depth of 80 meters. So you see how important they are to welcome other forms of life. They also provide support for some animals to lay eggs, for example. So they are extremely important, but they are also easy to break. A troll net or a long line or a plastic bag floating and ending up on it, it would either tear it apart or choke it to death, which would destroy not only the animal itself, but the habitat, the home it provides for other species. And also, especially on the deeper part of the reef in our project location, we find massive sponge, like really massive ones. This one is about 2 meters in diameter. It's huge. And once again, they provide support for other fish or invertebrates to lay eggs or take a bite. And what is, I think, one of the most interesting sponge I've found down there with my colleagues is probably these branching sponge. They are amazing. This is not a coral. This is really a sponge. So this photo has been taken a bit deeper than 100 meters. I think 105 meters. And actually, it's interesting to see that they are very similar in terms of ecological role, that those branching that follow. If you see the branches, you would see animals everywhere, invertebrates like shrimps, but also vertebrates like those fish that you can see on the right side of the picture. And it's actually full of life. And this is a close-up of one fish that was found at the depth of 100 meters. This is a siphon fish, so it's a kind of cardinal fish, probably a new species here, hiding at 100 meters beneath the surface in between the branches of this sponge. So you can imagine just 100 meters away from us, there is still some species that are unknown, which is actually great. I don't think we should discover all of them and list them all. I don't think so, but it's always exciting when you dive and you photograph or you can see a species that has not been documented before or not in this area. Again, these and as a life support to other forms of life, but they're also easy to be destroyed by our activity if we are not a bit careful. MCEs are also the realm of prehistoric animal, like these Featherstar or crinoids. These are filter feeders, so they usually perch themselves on top of a rock or on top of a gorgonian or set, and expand their arm from one. Also very important for the ecosystem down. Pictures that they I don't know, maybe the game spot the difference. Well, you can try here and spot the difference between those two images. The photos have been taken at a depth of 106 meters, and they are extremely similar. You can see the Featherstar seems to not have moved at all in between the two photos. And the interesting thing about this is those two images have been taken at 1 month interval. So it means that during 1 month, you have some animals that have not moved at all, or as far as we know. I don't think they would have moved and come back to the exact same position, but why not? It's a possibility also. But the fact is, that shows how important those corals, soft corals, are for the mesophotic habitats. And they really host species that are calling those places home. And if you destroy that coral with a long line or with a drifting net, you would destroy not only the animal itself, that could be maybe decades, I mean, quite old, maybe centuries old, or I don't know, but you also destroy the house it provides to other species. Out, we find now in very dense colonies. So sometimes you can see hundreds of them in a crack or under an overhang or in between the branches of a sponge. And the funny thing is that they are all connected to each other with their antenna. So they all touch each other with their antenna. And when one shrimp is scared and is moving away, you have the whole colony individual adaptation, the light of the rest of the time, those habitats are completely dark. So being in touch with your neighbor is always a great way to avoid predators, for example. This is a long-nosed hawkfish that I photographed at 82 meters, at a depth of 82 meters. And this is just to illustrate that mesothetical ecosystems are connected to shallow water reefs, because these species can be also found at 20 meters. So you have some species like this hawkfish that can live both shallow and deep. And that's maybe why some people are seeing mesophotic coral ecosystem as a kind of backup plan for a damaged reef, as a source to repopulate a damaged reef. When it can indeed help in resilience of the shallow water reef, it shouldn't be seen as a pure backup plan, because you have many species, and in fact, most of them, who can't live at those depths or can't live shallower. And actually, this is a case of species like this hogfish that is usually found deeper than 50 meters. But you have species of fish that are even more deep dwelling, I mean, really living deep and can't really venture shallower. You have this prognatode, which is probably once again a new species of a butterfly fish that we had photographed here in Bali. We have scorpion fish, like with this amazing supraocular cirri above the eye, those kind of antennae that are giving the special look to this creature. But you have some fish like the checked swallowtail here that usually never venture shallower than 100 meters. In some places of the world, it can be found. We don't really understand why. Maybe the light conditions are a little bit different than most of the other tropical reefs systems. And you can see on this picture the importance of the habitats, because this fish can hide in between the branches of the gorgonians there, or between the sponges, or behind the sacks. And they will this is then really important one, deep dwelling. I don't see is a witness, proof of the adaptation to low light environment. And actually, the name of the fish is a red stripe bigeye, the common name, and is usually found between 100 and 200 meters. Actually, we think that this is one of the first photos of these fish taken by a diver, because they are so deep, their habitats are hardly accessible. So taking a photo of fish like that is even more rare at the moment. And you can see in the background, again, the complexity of the habitat and the importance for the fish of having a complex habitat of sponges and soft corals, so they can hide or camouflage within those other forms of life. Because indeed, mesophotical ecosystems are also hunting grounds for various predator species, like this jack that we found hunting very fast on the deeper slope of the reef. Because if you are well adapted to hunt in low light environment, this is perfect, because your prey will hardly see you, so you have an advantage over them. But you need, you need to be adapted to hunting in low light condition. This is a video that we shot at 100 meters beneath the surface of a banded sea crate, very good sized banded sea crate. And it was clearly hunting. And that was amazing. We were here counting every second on our computer, because every minute we spend at 100 meters, it's another 10 minutes of decompression. So imagine now 5 minutes at 100 meters, it's already an extra hour of decompression that we have to add to the already existing decompression stop. So it's huge. And we were timing as we were counting. We were at the end of the dive and we were like, oh my God, we don't have a lot of time. And you see this banded sea crate just not seeming to care much, just at reach 100 meters on one breath and hunting peacefully down there. And that was amazing. And that shows again the connectivity that exists between surface and those deep reefs, because banded sea crate, they can also be found on land, right? They breed on land, and they can hunt at 100 meters. So you see the connectivity and the importance of these deep reef for emblematic animals. And speaking of which, we also have these incredible encounters with sharks like hammerheads, scalloped hammerheads in that case, or thresher sharks that are unfortunately not found as often as we would like to, because as everywhere else in the world, their stock are declining due to overfishing and destructive fishing. So yeah, but we still can find some nice shark encounters down on the reef. And those deep reefs are, as I mentioned briefly earlier, can be a nursery ground for some species of fish. And you will find some fish growing here because basically the low light environment is an advantage. You can hide more efficiently against predators. You can also benefit from less competition for food than in shallower reef, as long as you can adapt, of course, to the low light, to the lower temperature, and maybe to the more scarcity of food. But if you can adapt to that, it's likely a safe place to grow until you reach a decent size where you can then colonize shallower waters eventually. And during our project, actually the focus of our project was the deep cleaning station for the bumphead sunfish, Mola alexandrini. So this is a bumphead sunfish. This is the heaviest bony fish that is roaming our ocean, and it happens to engage cleaning interaction deeper on the reef. This photo has been taken at a depth of 70 meters, and you can see there is behind it a longfin bannerfish. And this longfin bannerfish will actually pick the parasites from the skin of the bumphead sunfish. So it shows also the importance of mesophotic coral ecosystems by providing services to species. Having cleaning areas down there, it seems an important aspect for some species, such as the bumphead sunfish. Unfortunately, deep reef ecosystems are also threatened, or mesophotic coral ecosystems are also threatened by plastic. Of course, there is not a single dive we do down there where we don't find plastic, and that's really a heartbreaking sight.
Oh, hopefully we can get Alexis back in just a second there or so. Connection that was on the edge for a while might have failed us. But if it had to have failed us, it's on a beautiful picture to wrap up with. Quite exquisite.
On the right side, you see a food package wrapping that is covering a small crab that is unfortunately unable to get rid of. So really, we have to, as a citizen, we need to, of course, elect decision makers that care for this plastic problem and tackle the plastic as its source by stopping the use of plastic in some cases. And us as citizens, I think we can also do our part by moving towards a zero waste kind of lifestyle whenever it's possible. Because switching from plastic to paper, for example, it's not necessarily a solution, right? Yes, you will not see those heartbreaking images when you're diving, but paper is still a natural resource. It's still exploitation of a natural resource. And the best waste basically is really the waste we don't produce, right? So now I don't want to end on a sad image. I'm going to put back this image showing the faces representing the mesophotic coral ecosystems, and the faces we have to remember, and that should motivate us to keep fighting for a better preservation of our oceans. Because all these creatures here, they can't fight for themselves, right? So they need us to at least advocate and raise awareness about their existence, as we only consider protection of our oceans for our own benefits. That's what we hear everywhere. But we should not forget that there are other living things down there, and that we should protect the oceans, not only for us, but also for them. And I wish that conservation will become stronger and stronger in the coming years, and that we have a global ocean preservation that is really efficient and long-lasting. So thank you very much for your attention. Let me know if you have any question. That's it for me.
Alexis, what a beautiful program, and thank you for the last slide there with ways people can keep the learning going. I love the icon of Unseen Expedition. That's spectacular. I know you're having a bit of trouble with connection, so I want to make sure you can still hear me, hopefully.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, you cut out for a minute there, so that's good to know. Again, for anyone to keep learning more, check out at Unseen Expeditions, more beautiful photographs. Alexis, for our audience that is divers or snorkelers, people that get into the ocean, how long does it take to get the training to be able to go and document these amazing ecosystems the way that you do? How did you get your start, and how long did it take?
Yeah, well, it depends. If you want to do it seriously, it will take, honestly, years of training. You can't... I know a lot of people now are tending to rush, and they want to go deep. Even they just discovered scuba diving a few months ago. But this is something that should really take... we should really take a slow approach. And it takes years, because you need to learn how to dive. You need to learn how to use those complex machines, and then you need to work and you need to take pictures. So it's really a lot of things that are going on at the same time during these dives, and things can go wrong really fast. So you need to really take it slow, and if you want to really be on the safe side, take a couple of years to learn all the things before you can get into that.
I'm really glad you mentioned it that way. I mean, this is something that we've had a lot of technical divers on our program before in a variety of ways, and all of them will tell you that you should never go into it with a light approach. You should make sure you know the skills necessary, you have the necessary precautions and respect for what you're about to do. So I'm glad you highlighted
Absolutely.
Alexis, so we talked today a lot about Indonesia, some of the spectacular reefs there. Are there other places in the region or around the globe that you have been or would like to go to do this work?
Oh, well, everywhere, basically, really. I've not been able to dive that deep in other places yet, but I've been doing some deeper dive in the Mediterranean. I'm from France, and I've been diving to the 40 meters in the Atlantic or Mediterranean Sea. But I mean, everywhere. I mean, Southeast Asia is obviously a wonderful place, but you don't have those reefs there, so I'd be keen to explore any other places, but not only with those reefs. I mean, doing some deeper dive in Arctic or polar regions would be also very, very interesting, and I'm sure there is still so much to discover.
I certainly hope you get that chance, and if you do go to one of those places, we'll come back and have you on for BioFest 2023, okay, to highlight some of that cool work.
Yeah,
I like it.
Sure.
Before we wrap up with you, I know we're keeping the BioFest going. We've gone a little bit over what we typically do. So I want to just stress, you highlighted when you go to these areas pretty deep down in the water, you find plastic on every single dive. And so I'm curious what people can do at home, no matter where they're joining from. If they never live on a coast or have the opportunity to dive like you do, what can people do to help save that ecosystem and help prevent it from sort of accumulating garbage and other threats to the wildlife that's down there?
Well, I think that, everyone should take their responsibility, because it's too easy now. I mean, you hear a lot of people blaming each other, government blaming citizens or industries, and industries blaming citizens for not disposing the plastic properly. The truth is, especially in developing countries, or you don't have really a proper waste management facility. So even though you put your plastic in your garbage bin, you have high probability that this plastic will anyway end up somewhere in a landfill if you're lucky enough. So really, and it's not. I mean, similar in Europe actually. You still have that kind of problem. We don't know what to do with the amount of trash we produce. So really, for me, it's the approach I've been taken now since a couple of years is to reduce my waste consumption as much as I can. Avoid plastic wrapped products. Okay, it means you might not have a Snickers bar or whatever, but you would still find some alternatives, and I think that's a citizen approach. I mean, everyone can do it. It doesn't cost much more money, and it actually can save you money. So I think really reducing the waste at home, and of course, when you have waste, dispose of it properly. Try to reuse it, repurpose it. And eventually, the last solution would be recycling it.
Alexis, thank you so much for that great final message. And again, it's something that I think all of us around the world can get behind. You know, there's no politics towards marine plastic. All of us look at a beach or a reef with plastic pollution in it and go, wow, that's terrible, which means it's a solution that we can all take part in so readily. You can drink from the tap if you're in a place that happens to have good, clean, fresh water. You can do a whole bunch of things in your everyday existence that prevent plastic waste from ending up in the oceans or being created at all. And I hope people take the chance to learn more about these ecosystems to help conserve them and to follow along with your incredible work at Unseen Expeditions. Thanks so much for being a part of the BioFest, man.
Thank you very much for having me and all these wonderful speakers that you have managed to land here in the Global Biodiversity Festival.